we're socialized to believe that police and prisons and systems of punishment are what make us safe, but those systems actually perpetuate cycles of violence and whatever we happen to label crime.
Welcome to the Kindness Is podcast, presented by Kind Cotton, where we take a deep dive into the true meaning of kindness. I'm your host, co-founder of Kind Cotton, Kaitlin Johnstone. Let's dive in. I am super excited about my guest today. Today, I have Matthew Solomon, who was born and raised in Los Angeles and has been in the entertainment business for most of his adult life. He returned to school to obtain a master's degree in public administration so that he could have more of an impact in helping to create communities that work for everyone. Matthew is current adjunct professor and teaches conflict resolution and intercultural conflict. And he is the director of this incredible film that I am encouraging all of you to go and stream immediately, called Reimagining Safety. This is going to be my last episode with a guest for a while, and I could not think of a better person to have on with me. Matthew, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy for you to be here too, and to discuss all of the impactful work that you have been doing surrounding particularly your film, Reimagining Safety, which I just watched for the second time. And I was sharing with Matthew, it's funny, whenever I have a guest on, I've never held this up, but anyone who is watching, I write my notes all over Kind Cotton bags because, it's what I have lying around. So I have a lot of exciting things and questions to talk to you about. But first and foremost, what inspired you to create this film and to get into this advocacy work?
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of an intersection of a lot of various aspects of my life that that came to this film. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'm going to be a documentary filmmaker. I mean, it goes back to being born and raised in Los Angeles, in West Hollywood, and going to schools that were very integrated and diverse in the 80s, and having friends that were every race and religion and sexual orientation. And so at an early age, I was aware that there were disparities, not even with policing and my Black friends, but even when we would go to the mall, and they would get followed around and I wouldn't, and things like that. And then, so I was in this master's in public administration program, and this is 2020. So COVID, George Floyd's murder, BLM protests, and, again, being like, how are we still doing this? Why are we still doing this? How can we change this? And so I was applying all of my coursework to the issues around policing and incarceration, and got really interested in what are the alternatives. So I started, I was reading Angela Davis, started reading Mariame Kaba, that a classmate, told me about, and then more and more. And so when it came time to do my final thesis, one of my academic advisors was like, we know you know how to write a paper, but we also know you're a filmmaker. Why don't you do something creative and do a documentary? And I laughed. I laugh now. Like, I laughed because I was like, that's a lot of work. Like, like, I'm a filmmaker. I'm not just gonna like shoot a video and that's that. And so they were like, no, we'll do it anyway. And so luckily they dared me basically, and I did it. And I filmed it on my iPhone, interviewed 10 people. I wanted a variety of perspectives that were reputable and citable. And so it's activists, not just activists though, but it's like prosecutors, former police officers, mental health professionals, so that we could all approach the issues with policing and incarceration and the alternatives through a very practical lens. And that was my intention. And fortunately, that's what came out of it. I finished the film, submitted it, got an A, which is fine. But then I started showing it to people just to get feedback. And our first showing, which was USC law students, local activists in LA, some friends and family, and all of them were like, people need to see this. And so I kind of followed the model of the movie 13th and started reaching out to do community screenings. And so to date, this is a little over a year we've had 59 screenings across the country, with more coming up, including the city of Newark, where we've screened a couple times. They're doing a huge Newark Reimagining Safety Festival on August 10th, where they're going to show the film, have a panel. There's going to be art and music exhibits, because that all ties into safety and abolition and things like that.
Mhm.
And info booths. They have an office of violence prevention, where they have violence prevention teams that are community based. So they're going to have info booths, and it's going to be this whole event around what is safety, how do we create safety, and how do we take care of ourselves.
I love that so much. So if
Yeah.
anyone is listening to this, you have more than enough time to show up in Newark and support. Something that stuck with me at the very end of that is what is safety, which is something that I feel like was pretty unique to your film,
Mhm.
right? Because you hear so much about defund the police, and this is harmful, and police brutality is horrific, and all of the statistics surrounding that. But your film gives a really great perspective into what safety is. And for me, watching it the few times that I've watched it, what I keep hearing over and over again is that safety is a well resourced community,
Yeah.
right? That's when we inherently feel safe. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Sure, sure. Yeah, we're socialized to believe that police and prisons and systems of punishment are what make us safe, but those systems actually perpetuate cycles of violence and whatever we happen to label crime, because crime is subjective. Like the
Mhm.
definitions of crime and what's considered criminal activity, or how things are prosecuted or sentenced, like that changes all the time, often based on race, um, uh, gender, levels of ability, like all these different factors play into that. So the reality is that the communities with the most resources are the safest, and those are generally wealthy white communities. And so one example is like the city of Beverly Hills. I live in Los Angeles. Like they had this directive to protect the perimeter of Beverly Hills, where in the last 3 years they made almost 1,100, it's 1,088 arrests, majority black people, in the last 3 years, with only 2 convictions. So they're stopping people at the perimeter. The city
Mhm.
itself is
Mhm.
safe. And actually, if you drive into Beverly Hills now, there's a big sign that says drones are in use, right?
Oh my goodness.
But the thing is, within the city, like it's safe because they have money, they have resources. So and then what are the resources? And Dr. L. Jones, who's a professor from Halifax, Nova Scotia, in the film, co-authored a 200-page report. And actually, we just did a screening in Denver with the Denver Public Safety Task Force, who did a similar report. And there's a Kansas City did the same thing. And across the board, it's like when people are housed, when they have food, access to food, when they have access to not just shelter, but like cooling centers, or job training, employment opportunities, when there's security, like personal, like
Mhm.
all of those things, people are safe. They're not needing to go out and steal or whatever, right? And I don't share this a lot, but I've been on in the welfare system at times in my life, and it's incredibly stressful. And this is in the film also, when people have mental health support, because anxiety and depression feed into people not being safe, right? So when people have their needs met, like we're cool. There's not
Mhm.
there's not these societal problems that need to be handled, and those are overwhelmingly handled by police and systems of punishment right now.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I go back to, because I think it's always easier for people to look at things, right, when you have a personal connection to it, which is
Mhm.
probably a huge part of this problem, is that when you're talking to, I hate even using like upper middle class, but
Mhm.
or wealthy, white, straight, cis, able bodied people in our country, a lot of the times maybe you haven't even been in areas that aren't as well resourced,
Hmm.
or you don't have a personal connection to that. And then we like tend to lack that empathy
Yeah.
towards something that we have not experienced. So I often share to people about um, my dad being diagnosed bipolar, and when he was at his most difficult moments, we were in the state of New York, and in the state of New York, within the county that we were living in, there were mobile mental health units, right?
Hmm.
So I was calling like mobile mental health unit every single day to go and do these wellness checks on my dad. And he was um, incredibly manic at the time and incredibly mentally unstable and having a lot of psychosis and just all of these things that cops are not trained in,
Hmm.
and they should not be, right? Like, let's leave this up to the mental health professionals. So in every single case, and you actually talk about this in the film as well, in every single case where the police were not called, where a mobile mental health unit was called to go and help my dad, no one was ever harmed, right? There was no harm. And I can't remember the exact details, but someone spoke to this in the film in a way that was like very eye-opening for me. And I think was it in Denver particularly that they mentioned when they were using mobile mental health
Hmm.
services or some sort of mental health services, that there had never been any incredible injury to anyone involved.
Yeah, yeah. They talk about in the film, Alex Vitale, who's a professor, a sociology professor, talks about the STAR program in Denver, and
Okay.
then the Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon, which STAR was sort of modeled after. They've both been around for years. Uh, Neither one, there's never been a call for armed response. And so nobody's getting arrested, nobody's getting killed. And, one of the things that I've in these 59 screenings across the country that I'm so happy to discover, and I actually want to go into more in the future, is there are other programs like that all over the country.
Hmm.
So other cities have it. We just don't know about it, and they're
Yeah.
not they're not funded. A lot of these are volunteer based. Like Sacramento, there's a program, and it's all volunteer based, and so the hours are limited. But when those folks show up, and even in Newark, I mentioned there's several. They have an office of violence prevention, where they took, uh, was it 5% of the police budget in Newark, put it into the Office of Violence Prevention, and this was 2021 or 2022, and they're experiencing record low numbers in crime
Mm.
because the right people are showing up and providing services. And so, yeah, like the community, when and this is one of the things that I took away from this is when we care about one another, we do things differently.
Hmm.
And those things are usually rooted in like everything, the sign behind you: love, empathy, compassion,
Hmm.
inclusion, justice, and kindness. And when we don't care, or when we see ourselves as separate, or when we're not invested, it's, oh, that's those people, or that's
Hmm.
that person, or you just need to make better choices, or whatever, which puts us at odds, which makes it, you know which are ways that we other each other. And then it becomes like Nikki Black, who's a sociologist in Inglewood, says at the beginning of the film, like, we have to agree that everyone deserves to be safe, and we
I
don't
have that
agree.
written down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Everyone
was,
deserves to be safe, and
yeah,
we don't believe that. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And we see
Yeah.
that, not just here, but I mean, around the world, and with the genocide in Palestine and all of that. And I'm Jewish, I'm not Zionist, but when I started to see at a young age the how systems of oppression, I didn't have the language for it, but
Hmm.
privilege and oppression, how those work. And you see it, like, I wrote a book about the Me Too movement in 2018, and then I was writing a column for the Good Men Project, where I was talking about sexism and racism, and then relationships and communication. And to me, it's like it's all the same.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter who it is or where it is. It's when you have a group of people that are othered and systems of oppression that keep them uh, without resources, without self-determination, the when they're labeled as not human. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They were labeled as not human. They
Hmm.
were, shoved into ghettos. They didn't have resources. Their most of their family were murdered, right? And so to see that, to know that story, and then to see it playing out in these other ways, it's like, no, this is not right.
Hmm.
So it's all the same. It's just
Yeah, it's all
it's
connected.
all
Yeah,
connected.
it's
Yeah.
something that I wish. Oh my goodness, it's something that I've been talking about so much more lately is just the interconnectedness of everything.
Mhm.
And we need to see that, right? We need to see that these systems are not helping any of us, right? It's not
Right.
helping any of us. It may be like mentally helping the wealthy, straight, cis, white people to feel safer, but in
Mhm.
all reality, it's not actually helping anyone
Yeah.
achieve more safety. Like, because that is what like the media has shoved down our throats for so many years, right? Like crime
Mhm.
and punishment and being harsher on punishment, that's what's going to keep us safe. But that in reality is only going to further harm all of us.
Yeah.
And I think
That's
that's a really tricky thing for people to conceptualize.
Yeah, and it's interesting. As you were saying that, I haven't really connected this before, but as you were saying that, I think there's something about feeling better than somebody else,
Mhm,
whether that relates to safety or not, but it's like, well, at least if I'm better than them, then I'm
mhm,
then I'm better than them. Like there's some, I don't have the quite the words for it in this moment, but I think because I'm always, like I said, I'm fascinated with societies and people and why we do the things that we do. And so I see, like, we could have a society where everyone's taken care of, where everyone is thriving and has their needs met. We could do that very easily, but we are collectively so committed to not that,
mhm,
to maintaining this separation, to having this imbalance with the haves and the have-nots, to
mhm.
labeling certain people as those are the bad people, like the good and bad binary, right?
Yeah,
Like that's another thing that we're drilled, that's drilled into us. Um, but again, if we got when we get that we're connected, and this goes to, it's interesting. I'm in a PhD program for transformative social change, and I've been doing a lot of work recently with decolonial and indigenous practices. And so much of that, I was going to say all of it, so much of it is like we're stewards of the planet. Like we're in not
mhm.
just relation with other people, but the environment, animals, the land, uh, everything. Like it's all like synergy and connectedness, right? And it's the
Yeah,
separation that really causes the deterioration of the planet and ourselves and our mental well-being and each other.
which we're seeing so much right
Yeah.
now, and that is the piece that I think a lot of people are forgetting because we are so hyper focused on this individualistic
Mhm.
way of being as opposed to collectively coming together, right? Like that whole idea of, I said this on a podcast recently, but just this very idea of having more we and less me is
Mhm.
something that we all need to be embracing. And it's not the way in which we have learned anything, particularly in American society, right? For the past however many years. Um, yeah, I could talk that could be a whole
Yeah.
that could be a whole other podcast episode here. I wanna talk a little bit about the history of policing because I mean, I know obviously that this is another form of modern day slavery, and I know, all of the intricacies of that, which I would love for you to talk about too, because I don't know that most people can understand it as such. But there was one part of the film that I was like, "Wow, I did not know it was linked quite that much. And that part was that the initial police force, and correct me if I'm wrong when I'm saying this, were actually slave catchers.
Yeah.
I should say they said slave catchers. I would believe that the correct way of saying that would be catchers of enslaved people, right?
Mhm.
So tell me about that, because I was unaware of that actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of so on the police cars now, like it says protect and serve usually, or serve and protect. But the
Mhm,
the real purpose of policing has always been to control populations, command and control, um, squash rebellions. Right? What were the rebellions? They were slave rebellions originally. Right? So the original police in the United States. And there in the film there's a badge, it's slave patrol, and
mm,
so it was slave patrol. It was catching runaway slaves, catching runaway enslaved people, suppressing those rebellions, and things like that. Now, and that was in the South. And then as things kind of expanded in the North, police were used to suppress protests, like labor protests
mhm,
and things like that, right? And then out west, it was vigilantes. And so as colonizers came out west and started staking their claim in indigenous people's lands, it was vigilantes who were deputized to keep those people off of our
mm,
land. So yeah, it's all part of that. And then like you were saying, or the direction we're going to, like with the 13th Amendment, when slaves were freed and slave people were freed, there's that clause in the 13th Amendment where they can be used for cheap or free labor if they've been
mhm,
convicted of a crime and incarcerated, right? And so we know about this from the movie 13th and other sources, that all of these major corporations use prison labor because it's super cheap and they get to put out all this product and make tons of money. So that's the other thing, like when studying systems of oppression, but also studying the history of different wars and conflicts around the world and things like that. When you look at it and you get that it's all capitalism driven and it's all based on an economic incentive, like even our healthcare system, we
mhm.
could be investing in prevention, but if we're investing in prevention, we're not selling.
No one's sick.
Yeah, no one's sick.
Yeah.
So it's all, and that's how insidious it is. It's all the economic incentive to keep people locked up, to keep people sick, to you know um, create all of these, like the fear of like communism, like all these things, right, under
Mhm,
these propaganda arms. But so the military industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, the um, you know uh, healthcare and industrial complex, medical industrial complex, all of it, right, is all profit driven. Right?
mhm.
That's the incentive.
Schools are running
Schools,
down that
schools,
road. Like, there was
absolutely.
another part in the film that I was like, "Yes, this is
Mhm.
that why are we so comfortable with defunding healthcare and housing and education, but we're incredibly uncomfortable about defunding the police?" And that was something that really hit home to me as a former educator and as someone who, the primary mission of our company is to continue to support inclusive education and to support inclusive books, because we are seeing such a ginormous push. I mean, schools have been defunded for years and years and years
Mhm.
and decades, right? But there's such a push now, to create so much destruction that we really turn to a privatized model.
Yeah.
And again, what is that? I mean, it's two things really. It's as you mentioned, when it comes to policing and prisons, it's control, and it's also money. It's
Yeah.
capitalism.
Yeah.
So, there's so much to unpack here,
Mhm.
Matthew. I think it's we could go on and on for hours, but I really appreciate all of the things that your film discusses, and I think it's a necessary watch for everyone. And I'm wondering, because I know I was lucky enough to get a preview of your film, what can the average person do to support you, support your work, support the film? How can they see it?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Well, the website is reimaginingsafetymovie.com, and there are links. The film is streaming, so it's on Tubi, Amazon, YouTube, and Google Play. So people can go out and watch it. People have been having watch parties. I know in Washington State there was a woman at one of our screenings. We've done like six community screenings that are hosted by the Black Panther Party of Washington State and East Side for All and some other organizations. But there was a woman there. She was like, I've done 11 watch parties already. I was like,
That's
wow, okay,
awesome.
that's cool. So you can, stream it, watch it with your friends. You can request a screening in your community. You can email me to do that. Um, watch it yourself. You can come to Newark. We're also screening in Atlanta around August 1st. We're waiting on the exact date, but yeah. So the website is the best to get updates there, or Instagram is Reimagining Safety Movie, and I post there all the time and all of that. So reimaginingsafetymovie.com, Reimagining Safety Movie. Those are the places to go.
Awesome. I ask every guest that I have ever had on the podcast if you could come up with your own definition of kindness, right? What is true
Mm.
kindness? How can you envision a more kind world? What would that be?
Wow. That's a good question. I mean, I think it really comes down to really understanding how connected we are, and that
Mhm,
um, me showing you any form of kindness has a ripple effect, and whether or not it's reciprocated, even me just saying hello, or saying thank you. Like there was this thing the other day where somebody was walking on the sidewalk with a stroller, and so I moved into the street, right? Um, that acknowledgement, that space for one another, that care for one another has an impact in a very
mhm,
positive way. In the same way that, like, if we were cursing out each other, it has a very negative impact. But
mhm.
but but those things, acknowledging the humanness in one another and the care, regardless of what we look like or where we're from or any of that, makes a difference. So that, for me, that's kindness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Kindness Is podcast. If you love it and it's adding even a little bit of value to your life, we would love, love, love if you could subscribe, rate, and review so we can reach even more people and make this world a little bit more kind.